Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Oxford Union. Indeed, welcome to Oxford. I know many of you have travelled far and wide to do this MBA, and it really means a lot that one of your first ports of call is the Oxford Union. We're delighted to have you. Before we proceed with the debate and the excitement to come, I'd like to talk very briefly about the Oxford Union, about what it is and about what you're about to see. So the Union was founded in 1823, which seems like a long time ago, but I suppose relative to how long Oxford has been around, it's quite recently. We started out on the high street, and you can see today, you'll see a pink building and a blue building, and you'll see the two rooms are exactly the same size. Now, one of those rooms was a debating chamber, and one of those rooms was a smoking area. And I think it says a lot that they're exactly the same. Obviously, since then, we've moved, we've expanded, and we continue to do what we did then, which is to protect free speech. And we do that in the forms of our debates, where world leaders challenge each other on key policy issues, and we do that with the speakers whom we host. Some are controversial, but ultimately they come here to be challenged. I think what we should do now is talk about the forms and the rules of the debate. The style that we use is British parliamentary style. Now, that might be self-evident by virtue of the setup. You'll see there's a proposition bench and an opposition bench, much like you'll have a Conservative bench and a Labour bench in the Houses of Commons. And crucially, you'll see two dispatch boxes, these sort of strange constructions on either side of Zoe, who's acting as my secretary today. Now, back in the day, as you might say, these dispatch boxes would have featured Bibles. So if you were speaking, you'd leave your hand on it, and of course you'd be speaking the truth. Now, we have a slight problem nowadays that you can't trust people to speak the truth with a Bible. People have different Bibles, people don't even believe. So instead, different presidents will leave in something they think is important. And if you lift up that lid, you'll see a copy of Percy Shelley's works from a previous president. And if you lift up that lid, you'll see a rubber chicken, which I suppose is symptomatic of where we are today. Nonetheless, it's a formal style. It's one that's been practiced for many, many years. And I suppose the only difference between here and Parliament is the absence of lines on either side of the benches. Now, if you ever watch Prime Minister's Questions or ever watch BBC Parliament, you'll notice these lines in front of the benches. Now, they demarcate something which doesn't necessarily apply today. So the sort of gap between those lines is the furthest distance between drawn swords in which it's still safe. Obviously, people would have taken their swords into Parliament. Things might have got a bit tense if you had a particular debate going on. And so actual Parliament has a line to ensure people didn't clash in a potentially fatal way. Given this is a university, swords I don't think were quite as much on the agenda, so we don't have those lines. But I would ask the speakers if they do have swords to just keep them by their side in absence of the lines. So each speaker is going to have 6 minutes. They will be told by Zoe when their time is running out. You will be able to interrupt those speakers. You can offer a point of information. A point of information has to be fact, though. You can't just say point of information and then say your opinion. And you also have to be accepted by the speaker, and the speaker has every right to reject you. If they're in full flow, they can tell you to put your hand down and you have to listen. If you'd like to make a point of information, put your hand up, say point of information, stand up, but don't speak until you're recognized by any of the speakers. The second form of interruption is a point of order. Now, a point of order is if you believe that one of the speakers has broken the rules of the House. For example, if they say something slanderous, if they shout from the gallery, and essentially if they run over time or anything else that pertains to the actual rules. I don't think we're going to need to worry about that too much, but I would encourage you to put forward your points of information. The other way you'll be able to get involved tonight is with some questions. We'll take a break after the first 6 speakers before the final 2 speakers, in which you'll be able to put your hands up, I'll choose you, and you can pose some questions to the speakers about what they've said. And I really would encourage you to get involved. So I think that's enough for the spiel. I'm sorry if you're already bored. We've got quite a long way to go. And I think we should turn to the motion before the House, which is, this House believes there is one and only one social responsibility of business: to increase its profits. I look to Professor Oren Sisman to open the case for the proposition. Thank you very much.
There are 2 types of companies in the world. Those whose profit motive is aligned with the common good, and those whose profit motive is not aligned with the common good. Those whose profit motive is aligned with the common good don't even have to think about whether they operate for profit or the common good, because it's the same thing. So how do they create, how do they enhance the common good? They produce stuff that people want to use. They create jobs. They open new markets, sometimes markets that are highly visible. It's not a problem at all. And if we want to think about Adam Smith, he said, whether they think about the common good or they think about profit, the invisible hand of the market will guarantee that they will act for the common good. And I'm an economist. If I had to test this proposition, I would measure the common good. I would measure the profit. I would not be able to distinguish between the common good and the profit, because whenever one goes up, the other goes up. So we can forget about these companies. The other company, or the other type of companies, are companies whose profit motive is not aligned with the common good, like mining companies, companies that pollute, companies that perhaps exploit the poor, whatever. So what do we do with these companies? There are two possibilities. The first possibility is that we tell them, dear company, please switch off your profit motive because we realize that it's not contributing to the common good. And we ask you to switch on another motive, which is the common good, right? The second approach is Friedman's approach, and this is saying, this is never going to work. Why isn't it going to work? It's not going to work because profit is in the DNA of the capitalist firm. This is how these companies build themselves. This is how they report. This is how they recruit young MBAs. This is how they incentivize them. This is how they promote them if they contribute to profit. And you can't, it's simply impossible to shut the profit motive off. So, if it's impossible to do, what's the point to pretend that it can be done or that it should be done? So probably you're asking yourself now, okay, so these are companies that don't contribute to the common good. What should we do about them? Well, the answer is simple. We should regulate them. That's what we have governments for. And the governments will levy taxes on them or put some laws on them so that if they don't operate according to the tax or the law, that will undermine their profit motive, and that way you can realign them again with tough regulation with the common good. So now probably you're asking yourself the following question. You might be saying, fine, we understand that it's not going to work, but what's the harm in trying? Perhaps it won't work, but maybe it will work. So let's try it anyway. And if it doesn't do anything good, at least it will do some good PR for the business world. Now, I would like to argue that actually the idea that companies can work for something else than the private profit is actually a very damaging idea. Why is it so damaging? Well, the first reason that it is so damaging is because it will soften regulation. These companies will come to the regulator and say, dear regulator, you don't have to regulate us. Why don't you have to regulate us? Because we switched off the profit motive. Now we are reformed. We have changed. Our DNA has been re-engineered, and we are going to work only for the benefit of the common good. And the regulator might be tempted to believe this kind of thing and will say, okay, I don't have to regulate you. I can be soft on you. And I recommend everyone in this room who's interested in the question to go to the website of Al Jazeera, which has an excellent documentary now called Pricing the Market. And they document in great detail how companies that cause a huge environmental damage actually at the same time put on a big show of PR with a few insignificant projects, and at the same time that they damage the environment, they also manage to win all sorts of environmental prizes because they say all the right thing, they put all the right they write words on the website. They have a big part of the website about corporate responsibility, and they win the prize. That's one reason why it's harmful. But it's not only harmful for regulation, it's even harmful for the companies themselves. Why is it so harmful? Because it's not going to work. And if it's not going to work, the companies are going to be blamed later on for that not working. You want an example? Here's an example. Why did we have a financial crisis? Well, we had a financial crisis because the economy as a whole lended too much. Now, who's blamed for that? Well, in my view, the regulators have to be blamed for that. They allow the banks to expand credit too much. Instead, the banks have taken all the blame. Some bankers went to jail. How much time do I have? Your finger is on the trigger. So bankers have been taken to court. Bankers have been deprived of, were fired. Why? Because everyone was expecting them to internalize the common good, to act for the common good, but actually they were working for the profit motive. There are many other examples. As I said, I recommend everyone to go to this great program in Al Jazeera and see how companies are playing the system under the flag of the common good.
I thank the Professor for his speech, and now look to Mr. Alan Morrison to open the case for the opposition. Thank you.
Mr. President, my honourable opponent and I have similar worldviews. I'm a classical liberal. I verge on the libertarian. I think a free market operating under the rule of law is a beautiful thing. But he and I appear to differ in a couple of respects. Firstly, I can tell the time. Secondly, we appear to differ in our views on business. Let me summarize what you've just heard. It can be boiled down to the first verse of the classic 1979 Flying Lizards lyric, Money. The best things in life are free, but you can give those to the birds and bees. I want money. That's what I want. It's what I want. It's what I want. Our argument, in contrast, is well summarized in the poetry of the famous Sesame Street song, Cooperation Makes It Happen. I saw these crazy dudes and they went out on the street. They were cleaning out the empty lot and making it neat. I said, man, is this cool? What you trying to do? They said, making a garden for me and you. Come on, join us, man. Come on, let's go. Together, we can make a pretty garden grow. More precisely, this motion is about responsibility. It's a difficult word. We're responsible when first we acknowledge that we create our own life plans and sometimes those of others, and second, when we accept the justice of this situation. So responsibility is closely tied to personal autonomy. Without responsibility, we lead incomplete lives and we fail to fulfill our potential as human beings. So it's extraordinarily hard to find a better place to start a discussion of business than with the notion of personal responsibility. And this is where I part company with my honourable opponent. Business does not exist solely to maximize shareholder returns. Businesses are places where individuals go to exercise their personal autonomy by doing useful stuff together. So, for example, a rather trivial element of my plan of life is a desire to wear decent shoes. So, for example, trickers make them. When they intermediate between me, craft shoemakers, farmers, and other interested parties, we're all exercising our responsibility to choose a life plan when we deal, and Trickers is helping us to do this. None of us is very concerned in this exercise of our responsibility with Trickers' profitability. In fact, I checked this out. Last weekend, I pursued some primary research in preparation for this debate. I started out by asking the checkout guy at Waitrose what he thought his business responsibility was. Then I asked the same question in a fast food outlet, a wine merchant, a bookstore, and a pub. I got some pretty colourful responses, but none of them featured the word profit. So I telephoned a bank director. He definitely used the word profit, but he used quite a lot of other words too. Business organizations are tools that stakeholders use to collaborate in useful ways, and that allows them to exercise their personal autonomy. But as a matter of positive fact, those stakeholders seldom see their responsibility or their exercise of autonomy in terms of profit. Is it meaningful to talk about the responsibility of business independently of the responsibility of business stakeholders? Well, of course not. Business is no more responsible than any other abstract noun. Perhaps, though, the responsibilities of senior business people, perhaps their responsibilities are solely to make a profit. But I think that's nonsense. Managers arrange the institutional framework that allows people to come together at a business and do useful stuff. It's useful enough when they extract a profit, and if they're really useful, then their profits are absolutely huge. But their responsibility is to the usefulness of their actions, their ability to bring people together cooperatively, and not solely per se to the profit they generate. In other words, as the eminent rapper Alik Ice famously said, entrepreneurship is about making life easier for humanity, while money becomes a byproduct. It's quite hard to rap that. Managers have a responsibility to humanity's desire to collaborate usefully and not solely to the profit motive. So the motion is incorrect as a matter of positive fact. Normatively, it's a recipe for dystopia. For example, how should a business person react when she's faced with a naive customer who does not understand that, say, the mortgage she's being sold or the insurance policy that's being sold is inappropriate? On the one hand, the business person could sell the mortgage and realize a profit. On the other hand, she could appreciate her responsibilities and advise the customer not to borrow. It's intuitively obvious to me that the former approach, which is dictated by a focus solely upon profit, is wrong. Trust in business and social life in general would completely collapse in a society where that sort of focus was legitimate. Of course, my honourable opponent has already responded to this point by arguing that profit maximisation should occur within the law and that we should regulate away this sort of problem. He could point to the $14 billion fine recently imposed on Deutsche Bank for making the wrong decision in precisely the mortgage situation. But the law cannot precisely pin down what is allowable, and allowing actors to maximise profit within the law and without recourse to anything else would probably lead to disaster. So many of the decisions and so many of the rules that guide our behaviour are not written down. They're embedded in our social environment and our culture. As the former Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs said, those who believe that a liberal democracy and the free market can be defended solely by the forces of law and regulation without an internalized sense of duty and morality are tragically mistaken. So, in summary, you face a choice between the flying lizards and the Muppets. The lizards prioritize money. The Muppets do not. They understand the collaborative nature of business and the value of a pretty garden. You have to decide whether your vision of responsibility mirrors the lizards or the Muppets. But it's clear to me that responsibility runs far deeper than profit, and the Muppets are more attractive than lizards. So I strongly urge you to vote for collaboration and for personal autonomy, and hence, resoundingly, to reject this motion.
Let's start with an example. Imagine the University of Oxford can go online, put everything for free, available to anyone, and the strategy may pay off. We may get millions of people watching our lectures, enjoying them, and we do a killing. But it may not work. It may also be the case that people realize that what we teach is not that exceptional, and the university gets into trouble. Imagine in this example that the expected payoff is higher than the expected cost in this strategy, and therefore if you're profit maximizing, you should go for the risky stuff. You should go online and just go for it. Now the problem is if Oxford University goes for this and it turns bad, not only a number of us lose our jobs, but we also lose a lot of money in the houses we have in this city, and a lot of people in this city lose their jobs, etc. If Oxford University sinks, the entire city sinks. And so there is a so-called externality and a huge cost that is borne by other people of this decision. And this massive cost may then, if you take it into account, outweigh the benefits of this risky strategy. So in that case, you hope, everyone hopes, that the University of Oxford would do what is good socially, i.e. take into account the social cost of its decision and not look only at the benefits and cost from a pure university standpoint. So we all agree on that. Let's take another example. Let's imagine that I get appointed to a very crappy job, like CEO of Tesco, right? Could have taken Rio Tinto. Let's go for Tesco. People don't like me, I sell overpriced junk, it's a tough job, okay? I cannot tell my mom this is the job I got, This is really bad. So what I could do is that I could, in every single Tesco, have 2 full aisles full of French food at good prices. I get everyone to love me, right? Imagine that. You live in the UK and you get to eat French food at a reasonable price. It doesn't get any better than that, okay? Now the problem is that I'm buying myself an image at the cost of my shareholders, right? Because if Tesco doesn't do that, it's probably profit maximizing to sell overpriced junk rather than good French food at a reasonable price. Is that fair? Is it fair that I buy myself a conscience, that I call my mom and say, have you seen me on TV doing this great speech about getting better food into, schools and families in the UK, getting people to eat proper stuff, to discover that there is like real food out there, that it's very important for you, that you can be healthier with like eating properly, all these things that can be on TV every evening with my friend Jamie Oliver, and my mom would be very proud, but I'd be paying with someone else's money. That's a problem. We all agree that the wrong financial product should not be sold to the wrong people. We all agree that the University of Oxford should not gamble its finances away on a pure university profit objective. We all agree. But if we leave this to people's voluntary actions, we are in for some disappointment. We are in for some Tesco episodes. You'll have your country filled with French food. You don't want that to happen, do you? The reason why people should not sell the wrong financial products to the wrong people, why the University of Oxford should not gamble its reputation and its finances away, is because if they do, the people who make these decisions, they should go to jail and pay back for the damages they do on other people. If Rio Tinto should not pollute that river and this village down the stream, is because if they get caught, we should have laws that say that these executives who took that decision, they should go to jail and pay big time for polluting a river and damaging a village that didn't ask for it. Okay? That's why and how we prevent these sorts of problems. Ladies and gentlemen, social responsibility is too serious an issue, too universal an issue, too big an issue to be left to Sesame Street's characters. It's time to get real.
Thank the honourable member for his speech, and I would notify him that the union are actually recruiting a new chef. And if you had some French-inspired cooking and a breakaway from economics, we'd welcome you. I now turn to Professor Thomas Hellman to close the case for the opposition. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Life is not fair. And you probably think, oh God, he's going to argue that life is not fair and therefore we need to get rid of Friedman. No, I'm not going to argue that. I'm actually here first and foremost to say thank you for coming. Thank you for a fabulous debate. Thank you to the president. I want to give a special thanks to the opposition team for showing up. Wow. I wouldn't have shown up on that motion. There's no way I would have done that. But they were really courageous. I mean, Oren stood in front of you and sort of tried to keep a straight face as he was saying, you're going to rely on the government to solve this problem. Yeah, right, we all believe that one. Then he brings a bunch of examples about Al Jazeera, great examples which perfectly contradicted his main point. We went on to have some beautiful arguments. Now, I think you were really smart, and that's exactly what economists do. Your argument was based on saying, let me assume that half of what's happening in the world is irrelevant, which is there's a huge sector called the not-for-profit sector, and they're doing all of this stuff that's really important, but I'm not going to look at that. I'm just going to look at the other part. And then sort of the argument sort of tries to proceed. I'm not even going to, I'm just going to go straight to Ludo. I don't want to be here too harsh on everybody. And I mean, my God, Ludo knew he was losing this debate a week ago when he bought the T-shirt. He said, let me buy a T-shirt and let me talk about French food because maybe then I can get away with it. But, I mean, come on. Obviously, this is not fair. We also have Sesame Street on our side. We had the perfect analogy. We don't live to eat, we eat to live. And that's exactly what this motion is about. I think we had the most passionate spirit of an entrepreneur, and I'm going to come back to the theme of entrepreneurship. But I'm here to basically prove Friedman wrong, and that's not really that difficult. So, 4 points. Friedman is bad economics. I'm an economist, just like Oren, just like Alan. We've all learned economics. And Friedman is like 30 years out of date. And, economics is a young science. In those days, they didn't really know what to do with the Nobel Prize, so they just gave it to Friedman. But I mean, the economics is all wrong. It's very easy to prove that all of the assumptions that Friedman uses are wrong and all the conclusions are wrong. I'll leave the details to the footnotes. The second one, actually very, very fundamental, Friedman is wrong from a legal perspective, and the US courts got it all wrong for about 30 years. Because the motion doesn't say profits are bad. Did you read the motion? Apart from being sort of weird grammar, it says, increase profits, like, they can only increase profits, which means like a perpetuum mobile. I mean, that's not going to work. There's only one and only one social responsibility. That's the problem. Nobody said that profits are bad. But how the courts have interpreted this is that corporations are not allowed to use anything else but profit. So here's a bunch of shareholders who actually want to do something and they're not allowed to do it. Why is there a not-for-profit sector? Why do we have B corporations, a really exciting development in the world? Because people thought this is entirely wrong. Why can you give me a straitjacket in which I, as a shareholder, can't do anything except get these profits? That's not what the shareholders want. So here's the third reason. So bad economics, bad legal foundations. It's bad for society. We all know that. We all know it, and the opposition, you guys sort of sitting on the wrong side because you gave all these beautiful examples of why it's bad for society. So I'm not even going to repeat that. The most important, and for me most interesting one that maybe speaks to the heart of this audience is that no one in business thinks like this. So I spent my entire life thinking about entrepreneurs, and we talk about profits, obviously. And it takes about, all of 1 minute of a 60-minute conversation. And then for the rest, entrepreneurs care about creating value. And you've had a beautiful speech that exactly told you this. What do we have in our pocket? What did you use there before? It was an iPhone. Do you honestly think that Steve Jobs created the iPhone because he wanted to maximize profits? Do you honestly think if the shareholders of Apple had enforced the Friedman doctrine, we would have had an iPhone? No way. There is no progress. There is no innovation if you live by this. The only thing is private equity, and that's why Ludo is on that side of the world. For those of us who care about business, we know what motivates people. And putting a straitjacket that you're only allowed to look at one thing is never going to help our society create the value that we want to create. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to say one more thing. I have a couple more seconds. And We have a wonderful new president. I believe it's your first day, and thank you for hosting this event. It's been a real pleasure. He did forget to say one really important detail. So when you come into this room, you can use any door you want, but when you go out, make sure to take the no door. Thank you very much.
I thank the honourable member for his speech, and I was in fact getting to that point, but I appreciate jumping the gun. Of course, in tune with us being in parliamentary style, if you agree with the proposition, you walk out the door marked aye, and if you disagree and you want to vote with the opposition, you walk out the door marked noes, and someone will be there to count your vote, and we will read out that vote in the bar very shortly. Before we wrap up and before I thank you properly, I'd like to thank everybody for coming along. I know it was long. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please, a round of applause for our speakers. And I very much hope to see as many of you as possible at future union events. We've got a really exciting term card coming up of individual speakers, of debates, of social events, and that will be delivered to you in about a week's time, so plenty to be excited about. If I could ask you to remain in your seats whilst the guests leave, and then the results will be announced soon. Thank you very much.